This morning, on behalf of a number of community-based organizations and individuals, families, and communities who've been most impacted by police abuse in Chicago, we filed a class action civil rights lawsuit in federal court that seeks a permanent injunction to address the Chicago Police Department's years-long pattern and practice of police brutality. Brutality that's been disproportionately borne by folks in this room, disproportionately by Chicago's black and brown communities. We're asking that the federal court to oversee the police department and to appoint a monitoring team that's going to oversee and enforce a process to bring about the changes that are necessary to redress years of unchecked police abuse and a code of silence here. Something with teeth, though. And this process is and must be led by the communities who are most impacted by police abuse. It's a sad and a scary day when we have our federal government abdicating its responsibility to enforce our nation's most fundamental laws, the Constitution of the United States of America. Who do we look to when the federal government abdicates its responsibility to protect and enforce the civil rights of black and brown folk in Chicago? And what we look to is one another, the people of Chicago, the community, the very people who are most impacted by this. And we can't forget that it was the activism and the tireless work of people in the community. That's what first brought DOJ to Chicago. It was the people of Chicago who led the DOJ to definitively and finally acknowledge what those living in Chicago's black and brown communities have known for generations. So once again, it's the people of Chicago, the community that stepped up to do what Jefferson Sessions and his Justice Department doesn't have the will to do. And that's to put an end to systemic police abuse in Chicago, to put an end to this pattern of civil rights violations. To be frank and clear, this is not going to end on its own. The city's leaders and the police department have repeatedly proven that they are incapable of ending this pattern and practice of civil rights violations without external oversight and without sustained public vigilance. Problems in culture are way too entrenched. We're talking about issues of racism, denial, the code of silence, the lack of police accountability. So nobody here, don't be fooled by the mayor's attempt to negotiate a backroom deal with Jefferson Sessions, a deal that tries to keep the federal court out and the community out, completely out of the picture. A deal without any credible enforcement mechanism, a backroom deal without any teeth. The mayor says, we don't need court oversight, just trust us. We got this. Don't forget that this is the same mayor who repeatedly denied the reality of police abuse in Chicago until his hand was forced. This is the same mayor who defended the killing of Laquan McDonald as a justified police shooting and fought to hide the truth for more than a year until a court did what? Ordered the release of that video and the whole world witnessed the ugly truth. It was only after worldwide outrage, community pressure after that video was released that the mayor finally admitted what happened was wrong, what happened was horrible. But then what did the mayor say after that? More denial. We don't have any systemic problems in the CPD. We're just talking about one bad apple here. And he stuck with that too until the curtain was lifted on CPD's routine operation of the code of silence that covered up the murder of Laquan McDonald, a code of silence that permeates and permeated every level of the police department from rank and file up through the brass and orchestrated by City Hall as standard operating procedure. Again, only in response to headlines, mass protests, and the forced release of city records that led people again to take to the streets and call for the mayor to step down, that the mayor finally admitted, yes, there are systemic problems in the police department. Yes, the code of silence is real and pernicious. Yes, there's racism in the Chicago Police Department, finally acknowledging the fundamental reality and unfairness that black and brown children in Chicago are treated differently than his own and white kids. But even then, this is the same mayor who then said, what? We don't need the Department of Justice to come to Chicago. We got this. Again, until when? Until he was pressed and confronted with the credible threat, the reality that the DOJ was indeed coming and planned to launch what may be the largest civil rights investigation in a police department in our nation's history and in the DOJ's history. And only then, with that pressure, what? The mayor says, sure, we welcome the DOJ. And then what? After the DOJ documented years of unchecked police abuse, brutality against people of color, and the systemic denial of that reality, only then did the mayor sign a contract with the DOJ, a commitment to enter into a federal consent decree. He finally admitted, we need a consent decree. That's the right thing to do. It's the only thing to do. What happens then when Trump and Jefferson Sessions take office, and then they remove the threat of the hammer? What happens when the pressure and the scrutiny just begin to die down? We've seen what happens. The mayor then does what he's doing right now, which is retreating from his commitment to President Obama to enter a robust consent decree overseen by a federal judge with a hammer for a backroom deal with Jefferson Sessions. This is the same Jefferson Sessions who has demonstrated his lifelong hostility to the civil rights of black and brown folk. The same Jefferson Sessions who calls the NAACP one of the nation's leading civil rights organizations who work to protect the rights of African Americans in Chicago and across the nation un-American. The same Jefferson Sessions who lied under oath to the American people in the Senate just to get his job as Attorney General. The mayor says, just trust us. That Jefferson Sessions. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, don't worry. You can trust Jefferson Sessions to take care of it.